it says you're live, so I think we should be good to go. I'm waiting for it to pop up on YouTube first just
Yeah,
to
no worries.
double check here. Yep, we're live. Awesome. Well,
Sweet.
thank you everyone for joining. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing John O'Nolan. He is the founder of Ghost.org. Ghost was founded in 2013 and now sees over $7 million of annual recurring revenue. So, John, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd love you to first give just a brief elevator pitch on what Ghost is for everyone watching. My audience has some beginners who maybe are familiar with WordPress, maybe they've heard Ghost, but they don't really know what it is, how similar it might be to WordPress, or what it does differently.
Sure, yeah. Ghost is an open source publishing platform like WordPress, but the biggest difference is that we're focused on a single set of use cases. So we just focus on publishing. So if you're a creator or a journalist or even a business doing marketing, and you publish online regularly, we do that. So WordPress can kind of be used for anything you can create, e-commerce sites, all kinds of different platforms and products with it. We just focus on publishing. So if you've tried out something like Substack, you could think of it as an open source version of that. Or if WordPress had gone down a different path, that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that threw me off initially when I started testing Ghost, I was like, where are the plugins?
Mm-hmm.
Like, much different approach there with the integrations, doing HTML embeds, kind of letting that be the way that you integrate with third-party tools. In a way, it was refreshing to not have all the plugins that start adding to the back end and making everything more difficult to use. So, yes, much simpler. And Ghost also has the newsletter aspect as well, right?
That's right. So you can publish blog posts on the web, on your website. You can deliver them via email newsletter, and then soon they will also be available as an ActivityPub feed. So if you've used something like Mastodon or one of the ActivityPub enabled platforms, it'll be integrated, distribute your content via there as well.
Awesome. We have someone in the chat says voice is not clear, it is distorted. It sounds
Which
great.
one?
Yeah, which one if you could let us know it. Both sound great on my end, but I'm not listening to the YouTube stream, so hopefully there's nothing wacky going on there. But um yeah, can you walk us through your early journey with Ghost? Like what did your relationship with open source software look like and what prompted you to start Ghost?
Yeah, so I started my career as a freelance web designer, and through one way or another, that led me to contributing to WordPress. I was doing a lot of WordPress websites and kind of got curious about that. And after a couple of years of contributing to WordPress and having sort of seen how all of that worked, there were some things about it that I absolutely loved. The open source philosophies behind it, the idea of democratizing publishing, and that a group of people who didn't necessarily know each other from all over the world could get together and ship cool software that was just used so far and wide. It was amazing. And then the parts I didn't love was that the product was kind of getting unfocused. It was when WordPress was shifting from being this generic blogging tool into a big CMS that could do anything and everything. And the business model, even in 2012, had a lot of tension between the conflicts of interest that exist between WordPress Foundation, Automatic, WordPress.org, who controls what, how, what are the rules. Those kind of points of friction have been around for a long time. And obviously, more recently, we've seen some clear-cut examples of that. But even back then, that was the case. So I had this idea of what would it look like if you redesigned WordPress from the ground up, just to focus on publishing, not any of the other use cases, and solve the business model by doing it differently. And the doing it differently that we went for was to set up a not-for-profit foundation that runs the open source project. And that single non-profit foundation sells a hosting service that funds all of the development of the open source project. And being a non-profit foundation means nobody owns it. There are no investors, there are no shareholders. No one is standing to gain financially from whether or not it becomes huge or not. So everything just becomes about making the best possible product for its users and reinvesting all of the revenue it earns from the hosting company into improving things in the product and in the community. And I published that idea as a pitch in a blog post end of 2012, not really thinking it would get much traction, because even then, who wants another blogging platform? There was so many already, and WordPress was already huge. It wasn't like there's a gap in the market I can see, but the response was overwhelming, and it hit front page of Hacker News, all this stuff, and so that was the kind of launching pad. 6 months later, we turned that into a Kickstarter campaign that was overfunded, and then sort of step by step turned it into a reality. And it's been a long road over the last 12 years, but we're doing okay.
That's incredible. Also incredible that apparently the audio fixed itself. I everyone in the chat was saying, "Oh, both of your
There you
voices
go.
are distorted," and now everyone says it's fixed. I didn't do anything, so
Maybe it was buffering.
maybe yeah. Well, I'm glad it sounds better. Um, but one thing I'm curious about, it stood out to me right away when I started looking into Ghost, is the SaaS model that you've chosen. I'm most familiar with WordPress, so I'm very used to that whole WordPress.org, WordPress.com sort of
Hmm.
rivalry going on. And we've seen the challenges in WordPress. We're seeing those right now, but my brain also kind of went to like, is Ghost discouraging people from self-hosting? Like it's very sort of down that path of like, don't really think about self-hosting, just sign up for a plan here. It's convenient, it's easy. I love how you've streamlined it, but with that SaaS offering you created, why did you choose to still make it open source instead of closed source to get that tighter control?
Yeah, the point of the SaaS offering is to make it easy. It's not to generate as much revenue as possible. In fact, the incentives are almost the other way around. So one of the constraints, the self-imposed constraints we have, is we don't want to grow Ghost as a company to more than about 50 people. Just because doesn't seem like fun to me. Don't want to do that. I'd rather work in a small team where I know everyone's name and we all get on well. Um, but a side effect of that limitation is, with Ghost's continued growth, there will definitively come a point where we are not able to serve more customers and keep that team size. At a certain point, there'll be more demand than we're able to serve with a 50-person team. So it's actually completely critical. It's absolutely imperative that we make self-hosting as easy as possible, particularly when we get to that point, but ideally before we get to that point, so that the rest of the market, other hosting companies, are able to pick up some of the demand that would allow our core team to continue focusing on iterating the product and hosting a subset of customers, but still have Ghost be easy to pick up and use elsewhere. Uh, One of the realities of Ghost as a product, it's kind of twofold. There's the technical reality of Node.js, which is just a bit harder to self-host than PHP. There's no two ways around it. You have to, run in installs. You have to configure things in a way that's a little different to just FTPing into a server and dropping some files and one-click MySQL database via cPanel or something. Although I'm dating myself now because that's how I used to set up WordPress. Um, where was I going with this? The technical side, Node's hard to self-host. I had another point in here. It was really good. It will come back to me, I'm sure.
It's all good. So one thing that as I've gotten more into open source and sort of the nuances behind it, I've been made aware of the different licenses. And
Mm.
a burning question I have is, what did your thought process look like when choosing the license for Ghost, and why did you land on MIT over GPL?
Yeah, amazing question. I'm very passionate about open source licenses. So 12 years ago, the WordPress drama of the time, because there is always WordPress drama, centered much more around licensing than it did around trademarks. In fact, that was the most common source of drama. So you had marketplaces like Envato getting banned from attending or sponsoring WordCamps. You had some theme developers who were banned from being allowed to have their attend WordCamps or have their themes in the directory because they tried to use a split license or a non-GPL license. And I love that open source gives everyone the ability to do whatever they want. And it's a personal opinion, but I don't like that the GPL tries to force everyone into doing quote unquote the right thing. I think it's much more powerful to give people the choice. You can do whatever you want, including make something closed source, and then let them discover the reasons for why they might want to do it and the reasons for why they might want to participate and have that be a good thing in the world. And I had just witnessed the GPL being used as this political crowbar endlessly to disenfranchise people, to take away their power, to take away their freedoms, which to me is not the spirit of open source at all, especially in a community setting. So I wanted the opposite of that when I was thinking about licensing for Ghost. And originally, what I really wanted to do was use the MPL license, which is the Mozilla Public License. And the MPL basically says that the source code you release is effectively GPL, but any modifications, add-ons, changes that someone else writes, they can license however they want. So it kind of ensures that the original source code will always be open source. It can't be turned into something it wasn't intended to be, but it doesn't make any belligerent claims about what you, the next person in the chain, should do. And I love that license. I think it's the best open source license there is. But I was talking to my friend Danny about this shortly before we were kind of releasing the first version of Ghost and had to commit to a license. And he said, the MPL is great. You're just going to have one problem. You're going to spend the rest of your life explaining to everyone what the MPL license is because nobody fucking knows. And I was like, God damn, do I want to spend my life explaining what an MPL license is, or do I want to focus on the product? And in the end, I decided I wanted to focus on the product. So the easiest thing to do, the license that has no drama, no questions, no one is ever going to say, oh, but this license thing is MIT. So that's what we went with. And, I think different product categories, the license choice is more critical than others. If you have a high chance of being Sherlocked by Amazon, then maybe the MIT isn't a good choice, particularly if you're addressing, the cloud hosting or enterprise spaces. There might be other motivations which are totally valid for a different license choice, but I think it's been a good one for us. I've also remembered the thing I forgot from the previous question, which was the reason our website sort of doesn't make the open source side of things like very visible is the majority of Ghost users, I think more so than WordPress users, are not technical. They're not developers. They do want to use the software to publish online. They don't necessarily want to know what Node.js is. And having a big download button or a big GitHub button on the homepage scares those people away. So we try and make it as easy to find as possible. There's a big developers page, lots of docs. But we've catered to a slightly different audience when it comes to separating Node.js, which is much more technical, and the end users, which are much less technical than other projects might have.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, that was my first impression going to this site is, oh, it's so easy. Like
Right.
I don't have to really think about who do I want to host it with, how do I set it up, what are the implications? Because, in the WordPress space, it's like there's all this highly specialized hosting that's built for it. And
Mm-hmm.
with a smaller platform like Ghost, I would have the concern if I'm self-hosting, what if I pick the wrong host? What if their stack isn't optimized for it or they don't know how to handle a particular situation? So using the SaaS offering is, I'm sure, what most people would do. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, great choice with the license because I have no idea what MPL was either. So I
Case in
think
point.
yeah, that was smart for sure. So can you walk us through what the structure of the Ghost Foundation looks like? For all of us in the WordPress world, we're accustomed to the very complex, the WordPress Foundation, the .org, the .com. At Ghost, it's just the Ghost Foundation. So
Yeah.
how is that structured? What does the decision-making process look like? And I guess like who determines ultimately who has the power and who's in control?
Mm-hmm. So nonprofit organizations can be confusing because different countries have quite different setups and definitions of what they are and how they work. But the most important thing that they all have in common, kind of no matter what they're called, is that they don't have owners. So nonprofits have trustees, And those trustees can steer the company like a board of directors, but they don't own any shares. So I don't own any shares in Ghost. Hannah doesn't own any shares in Ghost, my co-founder. And if we ever want to leave, we can, but we don't get any big payday or something. So there's no vehicle for taking investors of any kind, because to take investment, it's literally selling shares, which don't exist. So you can think of it just as a normal company, works exactly the same as any other company, but nobody owns it. That's the most fundamental thing. The word nonprofit often confuses people because they think it means no money, can't have revenue. That's not quite right. Nonprofit means not for profit, means the owners are not doing it for profit because there are no owners. So it has a mission, and the organization is independently working towards that mission. So if we have money left over at the end of the year after all our expenses, it just has to be reinvested into the product. So the board of trustees functions the same as a board of directors in a company, makes decisions about what should be done, who should be hired, like all of the usual things. Our setup right now is the board of trustees is the two co-founders, so myself and Hannah, and we have oversight over the organization. And right now, the biggest difference between kind of the WordPress situation and us is, one, it's a lot simpler. There's not like these competing companies and interests. And two, we don't personally stand to gain from the decisions we make. You know, if Ghost's revenue goes up dramatically, nothing changes for me. My salary might go up, but you know, a normal like raise amount, not I'm getting a chunk of whatever the profits of the company are. So the incentives are much cleaner. They're much, much simpler in that our job, our duty is to do the best thing for the mission of the company. And there's not a financial incentive for us to do something different or strong arm anyone into doing something different, shall we say. As we grow, though, we're hoping to end up, and what I think is a good model that's used by several open source projects, is to have the board of trustees grow to include independent advisors who are appointed, and to include elected people from within the Ghost community. So maybe there are members who can vote on who should represent all the theme developers, or who should represent all the integration partners, who should represent all the journalism media companies that are using Ghost, and allow them to have direct input into overseeing the organization, make sure the good decisions are being made. So my goal really is to divest as much power as I can as Ghost gets bigger, to the point where the organization is more than just me. It should not just be my decisions. I think it's important to have leadership and decision making. I also think it's important for leadership and decision making to be held accountable by a group that has more interests taken into consideration than just one person or one company. So that's kind of where we are now and where we're going overall, which is not, it's pretty different to WordPress. There are some similarities to Drupal Foundation, although they also have a for-profit separate arm as well. I'm not sure exactly what all of it's going to look like yet, but man, we've got a lot of ideas, and I'm really excited by all of them. And I think, especially in the last few weeks, people are kind of, I mean, it has been feeling like a lonely battle for 10 years. If I tell people it's a nonprofit, and they go, but why? What's the point? Like, why would you do this? And, you know, last few weeks, a lot of people are realizing like why maybe it's a good idea to do it in this structure rather than multiple convoluted entities.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I started taking a hard look at Ghost in the past couple weeks. I'll just say that. I've heard of it for many years, but I was like, oh, okay, maybe I really should take a look. So, how does the foundation ensure transparency in decision making, especially when balancing between community input and business interests? Because I get, you know, it's a nonprofit, you're not incentivized to drive profits further, but it's also still a business that you're driving forward. You know, if you go in every which way and make it super convoluted, you're ultimately going to take away from the product. So, what does that balance look like for you between the community saying, we want custom fields, we want plugins, we want this, we want that, and sort of the grand vision of how to push the product forward?
Yeah, so I think in any company, you have some form of leadership or hierarchy in the form of a CEO or a chief product officer, and it's that person's job to listen to all of the inputs of community, customers, stakeholders of some kind, and decide which way to go. And at the moment, that person is me. We also have a wonderful VP of product, and what we spend the most time doing is trying to get as many different inputs as we can from all corners of the community, think about the strategic long-term roadmap of Ghost and where we think and hope it's going to go, and then choose the things that feel like they're going to be the strongest moves to get us to where we want to go and are aligned with the things that everyone wants. And then to kind of parlay that back to the previous question, the job of the board of trustees. So at the moment, I'm both CEO and on the board of trustees, but ideally in the future, you would have, let's say, a 12-person board of trustees. The job of the board of trustees is to oversee and determine, is that person, whoever the decision maker is, are they doing a good job? And if they're not, who are we going to replace them with? So you still need one person making those decisions and deciding, but oversight is also important at a certain point. And I think a key distinction is that you can't do all of this on day one. You can't say, I'm starting a startup tomorrow. I'm going to get a 12-person board of trustees, and we're going to, as a group, decide what to do about everything, because you would go so slow. You would go so slow, you'd never get off the ground. I think as a company grows, and especially one in open source, one in nonprofit, the importance of decentralizing, of taking into account more points of view, of having more oversight, it grows in importance over time. So in the beginning, you just need to get going. You need to prove that you have something that works. But over time, to have staying power, to not, have all of your risk concentrated in just one company or one person, you have to kind of open these things up.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to get to probably my biggest burning question, which is, what is your approach to the Ghost trademark? Do you have a standardized licensing fee for hosts or themes to use the brand? And who grants the license? I think that part of the question you've kind of already answered, but
Yeah.
I guess more so like, how do you approach the trademark? And is there a standardized fee, or is it sort of like, yeah, whatever we're feeling?
Yeah. So we have a trademark policy. You can find it, if you would like to see it, on ghost.org/trademark. It's modeled after, if not copied almost entirely from Drupal, as far as I remember. It's pretty old. We haven't updated it for a while. There are no fees of any kind that we impose on anyone, and we never have. Which is not to say that that's a bad idea and should never be done. I don't think that's true, but we've never done it historically. On trademarks are such an interesting case because they can be used well. There are valid uses of them. But in our case, say tomorrow I said, okay, we are going to do trademark licensing. We're going to try and make this a revenue stream. This is really important, and we're going to try and make everyone pay us something for using the trademark in order to market their services. If we did do that, I don't stand to gain from it financially myself. All of the fees would be going to the nonprofit foundation, which owns the trademark solely. And all of the money that the foundation receives, it can only spend by law on furthering its mission, which is to improve the open source software, do education around open source software, and impact journalism. So my read is, if we did that, my hypothesis is if we did that, I think people would be a lot more understanding. I think the difficulty that WordPress is having right now is there's this nonprofit which is license given away its commercial rights to its trademark to a different for-profit entity, which is standing to gain hugely financially for both that company that does not benefit the WordPress community directly and its founder, who is the one making the decisions about what to do. And that inconsistency, or it just makes it feel very different when you start asking for trademark fees, right? So it's an interesting one. I think so. We don't have the kind of WP abbreviation, and we've certainly never had anything like that. So it's been a little simpler so far. We do tell people if they start a company or a project and they put Ghost in the domain name, we do ask people not to do that. So we have to enforce a trademark because we have one. If you just let everyone use a thing, you effectively lose the trademark. I will say we're usually like pretty friendly and polite about it. We would start the email, say, with, love what you're doing. This is awesome. Keep it up. Quick note. Here's the thing about trademarks. Here's the policy. Can you just check over this? We want to support you however we can, but because of how trademark law works, we can't let you use the name. And you know what? If you're nice to people and you treat them with respect and you thank them for the fact that they're trying to do something with your project, which they always are, I've found that they respond. I've never had someone get angry or unreasonable. I think because we've been reasonable with them. Now, I may have just had good luck. You know, we may run into some horrible situation in future, but so far I've found that's a pretty effective way of dealing with issues when they do come up.
Yeah. I've got just a couple more questions here, then I'd love to get to some viewer questions. But my next question would be, do you see a future in which the hosting industry begins to offer ghost hosting similar to what we've seen with WordPress? Do you see that ecosystem growing as Ghost grows, or do you see it remaining focused kind of on the primary SaaS offering from Ghost?
No, it has to grow. Yeah, we won't be able to host everyone. So the hosting industry has to grow, which means we have to make it easier and easier. We will be incentivized to make it easier and easier to self-host and to try and recruit hosts to offer ghosts so that there's more options. And we already do this a little bit. We have a one-click self-install image with DigitalOcean, for example, who's one of our main hosting partners. We need more of those. We need more diverse range of those, more options. So yeah, that's going to be a big focus for sure.
And is there a simple way to migrate your site from ghost hosting to self-hosting?
Yes. So from our hosting, we can give people a full Docker export that they can effectively dump on any server, and it will just work just like it did before. You can also, if you don't want to wrangle Docker, you just want to go and set up a new Ghost install, migrate the content across, you can do that too. You can just dump all the content out and then re-import it. It's, you might have to do some of the settings again. There might be a couple of things you have to configure, but it's fairly straightforward. Yeah, data portability is super important.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to get to some viewer questions now. I'm looking at the chat on YouTube. I've got to check X as well. But Patrick asks, will Ghost integrate more payment partners? You can't use Stripe and PayPal in a lot of countries.
Yeah, we would love to. It's not that we don't want to, it's that it's hard to do. Same for email providers. So if you're self-hosting, you use Mailgun to send newsletters. Lots of people ask about Stripe alternatives and Mailgun alternatives. The only reason we haven't is it's really hard to do. The test surface increases so dramatically. And it sort of seems like it should be simple. It's like taking a payment, sending an email. Like, how hard could this API be, right? But there's a long tail of stuff that you end up having to handle in application logic, which really makes this more complex. Like with emails, you have to handle all the analytics, and the analytics are intense. And all the different platforms send back their open rates and click rates in slightly different ways. All of them handle replies to those emails in slightly different ways, which you sometimes have to deal with. And then unsubscribes, all that has to work. All of that needs to filter through to the email templates. Most email platforms have different markup or ways of kind of rendering that template. On payment providers, kind of same thing. We use Stripe heavily, not just for payments, but also for the structure of plans, pricing, customer objects, how all of those are linked together, what happens when someone cancels, what happens when someone's payment fails. The app has to kind of be aware of all of these things and get into a good state when something unexpected happens or something different happens. So yeah, eventually I would love to have multiple, both email and payment providers. At the moment, we just don't. There's no way. Team's too small, problem's too large. But hopefully, as we grow the open source contribution side of things and grow our own team, we may be able to branch out and offer more options.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question in the chat. I don't know how you pronounce this username, and I don't know how to put it on screen either. I'm more used
Good.
to StreamYard for sure, but it's all right. I'll just read it from the chat. It says, "Would Ghost go after a third party like WP Engine if they started hosting Ghost with other enhancements?"
No, um, but it depends, right? I personally, and this is just my 2 cents, I don't think WP Engine has infringed upon the WordPress trademark. What I have observed them do is fair use. They've referred to WordPress, which is the thing that they host. I haven't personally experienced or witnessed trademark confusion. But let's say that there was a hosting company that was aggressively calling themselves something like Ghost Official Hosting and doing really evil things. And we did reach out and try and say, like, hey, you can't do this. This is trademark violation. And they ignored that and just kept going. We would have to do something about that. That would be something that needs to be handled. And then I think it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, the handling of it, I would do very differently. It's a lot clearer because I would not have personal incentive for-profit companies that are wheeling and dealing. And I would just be a lot more careful about how we talk to the community about that. And I think you can get people on your side if you communicate with them openly, make them part of the process, and get buy-in. That's just a lot of it. It's really, if you're dictatorial about things, the default response is going to be backlash. People don't like being told what they should believe and what they should think. That's kind of logical. But you don't have to approach it like that. You can share openly. You can go slowly. You can not cut people off and make cutthroat moves that's going to have collateral damage. There's a lot of room for improvement of how to handle these types of situations if they come up. And I am by no means perfect. I've made all kinds of mistakes. So I definitely don't want to imply that I've got it all figured out, because I don't. But yeah, I hope it doesn't come up, but if it does, I think we'd do okay.
Yeah, and I think that leads right into another question that I got from someone, which is, how would you reassure a client about reliability? And I think what they mean with the context is not like hosting uptime, but just from this whole WordPress situation, how would you assure a client who maybe is scared of WordPress now? They're like, no, we want something else. That Ghost is for them. Their site isn't going to randomly be affected someday if there's a corporate conflict or a trademark issue. What are your thoughts there?
Um, that's come up a lot in the last few weeks, and kind of explaining to people how we do things, I've found is the most effective. Explaining we don't have a trademark that's commercially licensed to a company with $1 billion of investment, and I don't personally own the domain name. I own no assets of Ghost. The foundation owns it. So our model is just much simpler, and it's funny as well. All the packages that are part of Ghost are hosted by NPM, so not us. So we actually couldn't supply chain attack ourselves, if you will. But I think typically just talking to people about the structure and why it exists and why we've done it this way, and how simple it is the strongest general reassurance people can get. Especially when they have something to contrast it against, right? In the past we said, we're non-profit, we do all these cool things, and people are like, why? Now it's a bit easier, so that doesn't happen. So yeah, just I think generally talking about it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We've got another question in the YouTube chat. It says, what's the simplest way to install Ghost open source? Is it as easy as WordPress?
No, it is not as easy as WordPress, and that is really saying it's really a comment not on Ghost versus WordPress, but on Node.js versus PHP. So the back end of Ghost is written in Node.js, and there are some incredible upsides to that. Node.js is blazing fast. So the last time we benchmarked it, and I think it's probably improved since then, the last time we benchmarked it, Ghost would serve 19 requests in the time that WordPress would serve one. And under load, the differential kind of goes up exponentially. PHP with the same amount of CPU memory kind of grinds to a halt. Node just absolutely flies. So that's a big upside. A downside is it's not as easy to set up. It's not as easy to get going. It just isn't. You need a little bit more server wrangling knowledge, and it's not insurmountable, but it is also not, as I said earlier, FTP to a server and drop some files and off you go. So there's a little bit more to it. Ironically, no, I guess WP Engine have that great app. I was going to say Ghost is easier to install locally than WordPress. I think that used to be true, but WP Engine's local app is actually awesome. It's what I use whenever I want to kick the tires or test something on WordPress locally. But Ghost, you don't even need that. We have a CLI tool, so you can literally just type ghost install -- local, and in 30 seconds you will have a local installation up and running, working in your browser that you can develop a theme on top of or just test out, play with.
Awesome. And perhaps the most common question that I got from people beforehand is, how would you migrate from WordPress to Ghost?
Yeah, there are several different ways. If you have a small site, the easiest way is you install a WordPress plugin. It's called Ghost. It's on wordpress.org/plugins/ghost, unless it's been cut off, but I don't think it has. In there, you can export your WordPress content into a file that is compatible with Ghost importing it. And for small sites, that'll usually do the trick. Now, if you have thousands of posts, tens, maybe hundreds of users, the plugin chokes because I think it's like WordPress runs out of memory to compile this giant JSON file that we need. And so then you might want to look at either running our open source tooling, which is like a set of CLI tools. If you're a developer, you can find that on github.com/tryghost/migrate. Or if you would prefer, you don't want to deal with that, you'd like us to do it for you, you can go to ghost.org/concierge, and there is a form there you can fill in. And if you are using our hosting, we can do all of the work to migrate over to you for free, just as a part of setting up a hosting plan. But all the stuff we use to do those migrations is all in that GitHub repository. So we're not using any other magic tools. That's all open source. If you're comfortable running those tools yourself, you can do so. Let's see. Is there anything else? If you have a really tiny site, like there's just 10 posts, man, just copy and paste. You can copy and paste out of the browser. You can copy and paste out of the editor. Our editor is pretty good at accepting pasted input. But yeah, those are the ways. Unfortunately, WordPress, it has this export format that's it's XML and quite naive. So there's not a lot we can do with WordPress's default export format. It just kind of falls apart on larger sites. So we have to figure out how to get it into JSON with some more complex relations that Ghost understands.
Yeah, there's so many different methods, but I like the copy and paste one. I end up doing that more than anything else. But
I do too.
Oh, awesome! Glad to hear it's not just me, because I'm not the most technical, but even the founder of Ghost does it, so it's all good.
Yeah, I did it for someone this morning.
Oh, nice! That's amazing. We have a question from Areg in the chat. It says, is Ghost going to support third-party integrations like Zapier and third-party plugins like page builders?
So great news. We already support third-party integrations, including but not limited to Zapier. So that's all already built in. Plugins we're not sure. The reason we have not done plugins so far is the same reason we haven't had any security vulnerabilities so far. Is plugins add a lot of power, but they also add the different new and exciting ways to break the app drastically. The other thing they do is they take away the core, they can potentially take away the core focus of the product. So, WordPress started out as a publishing platform. And then through primarily via plugins, it evolved into a generalized CMS that could do anything, because people like your tool, but they want to do one thing slightly differently. They add a plugin that introduces, that. Take that over 20 years, and you end up with a very different product than you started out with. Now, it's not a bad thing. I think it's great that we have some general CMSs that can be turned into anything, but it's not what we want to do. We really want to focus on the publishing use cases. So we do have like the potential for plugins still as an idea in mind. I think it would look quite different. I think it would look like you could register a custom card that is something that you can use in the editor. That could be like a custom embed, or let's say a recipe with custom output and some custom fields. Things that feel like they kind of hook into the product in logical places. I quite like how Shopify has done that. There's kind of 1, 2, 3 places within the product you can hook in. What do they call them? Plugins or add-ons in any event. Not you can filter, hook, replace every single function, and that's how you end up with a UI mess. So yeah, integrations already exist. Plugins maybe someday, but they probably will look pretty different to WordPress.
Yeah, I think there's a middle ground to be had there, because one of the dilemmas I have when recommending a platform to someone is it's often the like Wix, Squarespace, or WordPress conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Wix and Squarespace are easier. They have more guardrails. I almost say like Squarespace is the iPhone of website builders. It's very
Yeah.
restrictive, but they sort of force you to make a design that's not offensive.
Yeah.
Wix is like the Android. It gives you all the power, and you can do stuff that maybe you shouldn't and end up with a horrendous looking website, but it's still relatively user friendly. Then there's WordPress. It's way more powerful. It's open source. I'm passionate about open source, and especially being able to migrate your site between hosting. I don't like with the closed source platforms, they can just say, oh, we're raising
Yeah.
the price, or sorry, we're taking these features out of this tier of plan you're on. Now you're going to have to
Yeah.
upgrade if you still want it. So I think what you're doing with Ghost is wise, because it's creating that open source option for the average user who has a certain need, who is not going to feel overwhelmed. I would say WordPress is almost more of an operating system, and for a
Hmm.
lot of people it's just too complicated. So I think you're on the right track with your vision for Ghost and the way you want to take things.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So let's see here. We had some people submit questions beforehand, excuse me, and I'm also looking in the chat. I don't think there's any over on X. Let me just double check. Yeah, no
Come on,
one's
Elon.
sent a
Show
question
people
there.
our tweets.
Right. I do have one more question that someone submitted ahead of time, though, which is, does it work for simple e-commerce, like selling a few items?
No. And this is a great example of the slippery slope, right? Lots of people want e-commerce. It's quite a common question. But that's how it starts. That's how you start diverging in your use cases. I think the second we have an ability for people to sell T-shirts on Ghost or something, you can no longer say that publishing is the core focus, right? So I don't think we're going to go down that route. But one thing we already have, and that I think we will build on, is integrating more deeply with other e-commerce platforms to make them compatible, or to make them play nicely together. So you can already embed products from Shopify, BigCommerce. There's a few more. If you go to ghost.org/integrations, I think there's an e-commerce category. You can see the ones that we have pre-written docs about. So I can see us doing more things like that. There is one area where we have a form of e-commerce, which is, so Ghost has email newsletters, and you can have subscribers who are logged in users of your site to those. And you can sell paid subscriptions to content. Now that still feels very aligned with publishing, because it's still content. The content is the product, right? And there's people making millions of dollars with this. So it's kind of e-commerce in that they have a business, they're making revenue from it, but it's not e-commerce in the sense of buying physical products online, delivering them, having a shop. I don't think we're going to do that, but we're definitely going to continue to expand the capabilities of the subscription commerce side, if you will.
Awesome. That's something very unique about Ghost that's built in. The newsletters and the membership portal is something that honestly surprised me when I started looking at it because you don't see that built into a lot of other platforms. So I
Yeah.
think that's cool. Your focus on publishing makes a lot of sense. I guess my viewer question would be custom fields, are they coming or we... I know a lot of people keep asking you about it, but that's like the number one thing for me that is missing that
Yeah.
I just can't see myself using Ghost for many of my websites unless that was added.
Yeah, I think custom fields has been front of mind for a lot of people recently, right? It's one, it's kind of closer to the category of mailgun and payment processing stuff for us. Of we're pretty convinced we'd like to do it. We can see a lot of use cases that are very much aligned with publishing where it makes sense. A really common one is people will have a podcast, they publish posts with the episodes for the podcast, but you need to put the MP3 URL somewhere. You need to put a link to the episode somewhere, or maybe the duration of the episode somewhere, so that when you have a list of posts with episodes, you could have a link and you could have the duration. Without custom fields, you can't do stuff like that. And it feels like you should be able to do that in a publishing platform. So we want to do it. At the moment, the limitation is the database. We've spent 10 years kind of shoving everything into the database without thinking as much as we should have about it. And so Ghost's main bottleneck and performance right now is the size and performance of the database. And we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment to address some of the foundational pieces of Ghost that have gotten difficult as we've scaled up. And I'm hoping on the other side of that, we will be able to come up with a decent solution for custom fields. We've actually already prototyped and designed like some ideas around how it could work, and I'm pretty excited about it. But yeah, we tweeted like last week. So should we add custom fields? And the notification just went. It was kind of intense.
Oh, I bet. I'm so excited. I look forward to eventually seeing the addition of that.
I
Awesome.
think it'll be a good one.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. For everyone listening or watching who is this is their first time hearing of you, where can they find you? Where can they find Ghost?
Yeah, find me John O'Nolan on Twitter and well, basically all the platforms: Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Instagram. I don't use that one. All the places. That's the username. Maybe you can stick that in the description so people know how to spell it. And ghost.org if you want to check out how everything works, what we've built. It's a lot of fun. Even if you use WordPress, love WordPress, use a different product, love that one. Try it out. Kick the tires. You can use multiple things. You can use many different products and love them all. So would love it if you try it out. And send me a tweet if you have any follow-up questions. I'm always happy to chat.
And you've got quite the Unsplash profile as well.
Oh yeah,
I
there you
discovered
go.
that the other day. That's super cool.
Haven't uploaded anything in a while. I should get back to that. I've got some new material I should upload.
Yeah, what do you shoot with?
It's a mix. Over the years, it's changed. These days, I have a Sony A7C II, which is kind of my go-to, and they released that new what is it, 24 mil 2.8, which is tiny.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it as like my junior Leica Q3 for about 1/5 of the price.
Nice. I didn't realize they came out with the A7C2. I don't know where I've been, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
great.
nice camera. I like
It's really nice.
I had the
Yeah,
original A7C and now I've got the A7 IV, but yeah, I
yeah,
liked the portability of the A7C.
yeah. The C has everything of the 4 and then a little bit of the AI stuff and processing of the 5. If I remember
Nice.
correctly. That might be wrong, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that's right.
I'll have to check it out. Well, anyway, thank you to everyone who has joined us live, and if you're watching the replay, thanks for hanging out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this interview. And if you liked it, let me know. We may do more interviews with other open source thought leaders. I'm just very curious about the big picture of what's going on right now in open source. So let me know what you thought. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe. Thank you again, John, for joining us, and
Of course.
I will catch you guys on the next video.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I
Sweet.
think we're